The alien queen had ruled her palace with pride and strength. Her word was law, her image untouchable. No one dared to question her. But now, as she stood in the shadows of her chamber and watched, she felt something she had not felt in years: confusion. A simple human janitor, a man whose only duty had been to sweep floors and polish silver walls, was now doing what her best warriors, her finest tutors, and her most loyal nannies could not. He was taming her children. For weeks, the palace had lived in fear of the twins. They were not ordinary alien children. They carried power inside them that burst out whenever their emotions spun out of control. They screamed and walls cracked. They cried and furniture shattered. They laughed and dangerous sparks filled the air. Many believed they were cursed, and the queen had begun to fear that rumor was true. 15 nannies had come and gone, all defeated, all broken. Yet here sat the human, his arms around the twins, guiding them with patience that no one else could match. The nobles whispered among themselves, their words sharp as knives. "If the queen relies on a human, she looks weak," they said. "What ruler trusts an outsider to control her heirs?" Their voices crept through the halls like poison, and though they dared not speak it before the throne, the queen heard them. Pride battled reason inside her mind. She wanted to deny the truth, but she could not. Every time she looked at the twins beside the janitor, calm and almost gentle, she saw something no alien had given her: hope. But hope was fragile, and danger was never far away. The twins' powers grew with every passing day. A wrong word, a sudden noise, or even a small mistake could unleash a storm. One evening, the boy's eyes glowed, and waves of energy shot out from his hands. The room trembled, the lights exploded, and the air turned hot with fury. Servants screamed and fled. Only the janitor stayed. He rushed forward, ignoring the searing pain of energy cutting across his arms, and wrapped the boy in a tight embrace. He whispered calm words, his voice steady even as his skin burned. Slowly the storm faded, the boy collapsed into tears, and the palace held its breath. The queen watched every second. She had seen warriors run from such attacks, their courage shattered. Yet this human, this janitor, risked his life without hesitation. He was not trained. He was not armed, but he never abandoned them. His hands shook, his body ached, yet he returned to them again and again. His strength was not in muscle or in weapons, but in something alien warriors did not understand. Endless patience, unbroken loyalty, and a love so simple it seemed foolish. The next day, the twins tested him again. The girl threw a tantrum, her small fists sending out waves of psychic force. The walls cracked, and a vase shattered into dust. But the human did not shout or strike. He knelt down, met her furious eyes, and held her until she was too tired to fight. The queen, watching from the shadows, realized she was not just seeing control, she was seeing trust. Her children, who feared every other caretaker, trusted him. The whispers grew louder. "The queen's pride is broken," the nobles sneered. "Her heirs belong to a human." But their words did not change the truth. The janitor had succeeded where her people had failed. The queen's heart, proud and cold for years, began to tremble with something she had never expected: doubt. Late one night, when the palace was quiet, the queen entered the children's chamber. She intended to see for herself what others only spoke of. The room was dim, lit by soft blue light. On the bed sat the human, tired eyes half closed, his clothes torn and burned from the day's trials. But he did not sleep. He sat with both twins curled against him, one on each side, their small hands clutching at his shirt. They were not screaming, not breaking, not unleashing chaos. They were resting, safe in his arms. The queen's breath caught in her throat. She had waited years for peace like this. For months she had prayed for her children to find rest. Yet it had never come, not with her, not with her nannies, not with her warriors. But here it was, given by a man who should have been invisible in her palace, a man no one respected. The silence of the room was broken by a sound so small that only her sharp ears caught it. The little boy stirred, his voice weak with sleep. "Father," he whispered. The girl echoed it, half dreaming, her voice soft as a sigh. "Father." both pressed closer to the human, as if he were the shield between them and the world. The queen's body froze. Her heart shook as if struck by lightning. She should have felt anger, insult, shame. Her heirs, royal blood, had given the word father to a human outsider. Yet in that moment, she felt something else, something she had not felt in years. She felt envy. For all her power, all her pride, she had never earned that word from her own children. As she stood there, hidden in the doorway, the queen realized a truth she could not deny. The janitor had done what her people could not. He had given her children safety, comfort, and trust. He had risked his life for them and never walked away. And in return, they had given him the one thing no throne, no army, no crown could buy, their love. The queen turned away before anyone saw the tears forming in her eyes. But in the shadows of the palace, her heart whispered the words her lips could not speak. The human had changed everything. The palace was alive with whispers. Servants, guards, and even the high-ranking nobles carried the same rumor from one corner to another. The impossible had happened. The alien queen's children, feared across the empire for their uncontrollable powers, had finally calmed in the arms of a human janitor. Not a soldier, not a scholar, not a noble with status and wealth. A janitor, a single father who swept the halls and fixed broken lights. The story spread like wildfire, and with it came both awe and envy. The queen herself walked the long silver corridors with a storm in her mind. She had seen it with her own eyes. Her children, who had destroyed walls with their screams and crushed warriors with their powers, had fallen asleep in peace beside the human. Their breathing had been steady, their small bodies curled against him, as if they had finally found the one place in the galaxy where they felt safe. It should have pleased her. Instead, it left her uneasy. She was their mother. Why could she not give them the same peace? Why had her strength and her crown failed where a simple human's arms had succeeded? Nobles gathered in the private chambers, whispering behind closed doors. Their words were sharp with venom. "If the queen relies on a human, she looks weak," one hissed. "What if this man takes more power than she knows?" said another. Their fear twisted quickly into plotting. Some wanted the janitor removed quietly. Others argued he was too valuable to kill, better to discredit him, to make the queen see him as a danger. The seeds of rebellion began to grow, watered by jealousy. Meanwhile, the janitor faced challenges no whisper could match. Each day with the children tested his strength in new ways. Their powers grew as fast as their bodies. The boy's eyes glowed brighter, his hands sending bursts of energy that cracked the floors. The girl's voice could now bend metal if she screamed too loudly. They were not only wild children, they were weapons the galaxy would fear one day. And yet to him, they were still just kids who needed love. One afternoon, the boy's temper erupted. A servant had entered the chamber too suddenly, and in fear, the child released a shockwave that hurled the man across the room. Before guards could rush in, the janitor stepped forward, holding the boy close despite the waves of power burning his skin. His shirt smoked, his arms shook from the force, but his voice was calm. "It's all right," he whispered again and again. Slowly the glow faded from the boy's eyes, and tears streamed down his face. The janitor did not let go. He absorbed the pain, both the child's and his own, until silence returned. The queen arrived just in time to see her son clinging to the human's chest, whispering, "Don't leave me." The guards looked at her, waiting for orders. For a moment, she wanted to command them to remove the human, to end the shame of her reliance on an outsider. But then she saw her son's trembling hands gripping the janitor as though he were the last safe place in existence. Her voice failed her and she turned away. That night the girl tested him too. Her nightmares turned violent, her cries shaking the walls until mirrors shattered and furniture split. The palace echoed with fear, but again the janitor was the only one who stayed. He wrapped her in his arms, whispering lullabies no alien tongue had ever spoken. The queen, listening unseen, recognized them as human songs of comfort. To her shock, the girl quieted, her small fingers clutching his shirt as she whispered, "Father, stay." The word hit the queen harder than any enemy's blade. It cut into her pride, her certainty, her very identity. For years, she had been their protector, their guide. Yet her children had never called her that. They feared her crown, they obeyed her orders, but they had never leaned into her with trust and whispered the word every parent longs to hear. And now, a janitor, a man without title, without honor in her court, was the one they chose. The nobles pressed harder the next day. "Your Majesty," one said with a sly smile, "it is dangerous to allow your heirs to grow attached to a servant. What if he seeks to use them for his own power?" Another added, "The galaxy is watching." They laugh already. An alien queen humbled by a human janitor. Remove him before it is too late. Their words were meant to wound her pride, and they succeeded. She dismissed them with cold eyes, but their poison remained. The janitor, however, knew nothing of these plots. His focus was only on the children. He cleaned their messes, bandaged their wounds, and taught them small lessons of patience and control. He told them stories from Earth, tales of simple families, of fathers and children who faced hardship together. The twins listened with wide eyes, as if the human's voice painted worlds they had never imagined. And slowly their power grew steadier. They laughed without destroying. They cried without breaking walls. For the first time, the palace felt less like a cage and more like a home. But change comes with cost. One evening, as the queen walked past the nursery, she heard laughter, light, gentle, pure. She paused, realizing it had been years since such a sound had filled her palace. She peeked inside and saw her children giggling in the janitor's lap, chasing bubbles he had made with nothing more than soap and air. No power, no chaos, no fear. Just children being children. And then she heard it again, both voices in unison. "Father!" They wrapped their arms around him, their faces glowing with love. The queen pressed her hand against the wall, her throat tightening. She had faced enemies, wars, assassins, but nothing had ever shaken her like this single word. She turned away quickly, hiding her expression from the guards who followed. Yet inside her heart was in chaos. The nobles were right. Relying on a human made her look weak. But the truth was undeniable. Without him, her children would be lost. With him, they had hope. Pride battled with fear, love with envy, until she no longer knew what choice would keep her empire strong. And in the silence of her chamber, as the whispers of nobles echoed through the palace, the queen finally admitted the secret she could never speak aloud. The human janitor had become more than a servant. He was now the only shield between her children and the chaos inside them. He was the one thing she could not afford to lose. The palace no longer felt like the queen's alone. Every corner seemed to echo with whispers of the human janitor's success. Servants spoke of him in hushed awe, guards traded rumors at their posts, and even nobles, those proud, sharp-tongued elites, could not stop themselves from gossiping. The story had spread far beyond the palace walls. Across the city, merchants and commoners repeated it. The cursed children of the queen had found peace, and the one who gave it to them was not an alien warrior or scholar, but a human. The queen sat upon her throne, cold eyes fixed on the noble court that gathered before her. She could hear their voices even when they did not speak. She could see their doubt even when they bowed. Pride had always been her shield, but now it felt fragile. For the first time in her reign, her power did not rest on her own strength, but on a man she had once dismissed as unworthy of notice. It unsettled her deeply. Behind her mask of calm, her thoughts burned. She had given this human space because her children needed him. But every day that passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Her children ran to him, not to her. They laughed at his jokes, not hers. They whispered secrets into his ear, never into her own. The more she tried to deny it, the clearer it became. The janitor had something she did not, something no crown could command. The nobles noticed too, and their whispers sharpened into open warnings. "Majesty," said one with a jeweled crown upon his horns, "our empire looks to you as the strongest of rulers. If the galaxy learns you cannot control your heirs, they will see weakness." Another leaned forward, his voice a serpent's hiss. "And if word spreads that only a human controls them, they will laugh. Already, foreign courts speak of this janitor. They wonder if the queen of the most powerful empire is ruled by her own servant. The queen's jaw tightened, but she did not answer. She knew their words came from fear, but fear often birthed dangerous truths. Meanwhile, the janitor continued his quiet work, unaware of the plots rising around him. To him, the palace was not a den of politics, but a home where two frightened children needed care. He rose each morning with tired eyes and aching bones, but his resolve never faltered. He patched walls when the children's powers cracked them, gathered toys from shattered corners, and sang soft songs in a voice rough with exhaustion. The children clung to him as though he were their anchor in a storm, but storms grow with time. One evening, while teaching the children a simple earth game with small wooden blocks, the boy's frustration burst. He wanted to win, but when the pieces toppled, his power erupted. Energy surged like a wave, throwing the blocks across the room and shaking the floor. The girl's panic fed into her own powers, and suddenly the chamber glowed with chaotic force. Servants ran, guards hesitated, and the queen herself stepped forward, ready to unleash her command. But before she could speak, the janitor was already moving. He threw himself between the children and the destruction, shielding them with nothing but his body. His arms bore the burns of their energy, but he did not retreat. Instead, he placed his hands on theirs, grounding them. "Breathe," he whispered. "You are not monsters. You are children. Breathe with me." Slowly the storm faded. The boy's shoulders slumped, tears streaming. The girl sobbed, pressing her face into his chest. The room grew quiet again, filled only with the sound of his steady voice. The queen's breath caught. She had seen her children unleash their fury countless times, but never had anyone, herself included, been able to stop it without force. He had done it with words, with love. And again, the twins clung to him, whispering that forbidden word, "Father." The queen turned away quickly, hiding the sting in her heart. But the nobles were not blind. They had watched as well, and their fury grew. That night, in a hidden chamber, a group of them gathered. Their faces were tight with anger, their voices dripping with venom. "The queen is blind," one said. "She cannot see that this human is dangerous. Her children call him father," another sneered. "What if they grow to obey him more than her? What if one day he commands them against us?" "It must end," declared a third. "If the queen will not act, then we must." And so plans began to take shape. Not loud, not foolish, but quiet and sharp, like blades hidden in robes. They would not strike openly. They would not dare risk the queen's wrath so directly. But there were ways to break a man without ever drawing blood. The janitor, unaware of the schemes, continued his days with steady patience. Yet he began to notice strange things. His meals tasted different, bitter at times. Servants who once smiled now turned their faces away. The guards at the door gave him looks colder than the steel of their weapons. He ignored it, focusing only on the children, but unease lingered at the edge of his mind. The queen noticed too. Though she said nothing, she saw the shift in her court. The nobles who once pressed her with reports now spoke in riddles. Their loyalty felt thinner, stretched like glass ready to shatter. She had ruled long enough to know what this meant. They were moving against him, against her decision, and yet when she looked into her children's eyes, she knew she could not simply remove him. Without him, they would unravel. Without him, the palace would drown again in chaos. Pride told her to act. Fear told her to wait. But her heart whispered something she dared not admit, that losing him might mean losing her children forever. For the first time in her reign, the queen found herself caught between crown and family, between pride and love. And in the silence of her private chamber, she wondered if perhaps her greatest enemy was not the galaxy outside, but the choice growing inside her. The palace no longer felt safe. What had once been a fortress of order now carried tension in every corner. The janitor felt it in the way the guards eyed him with suspicion, in the way servants rushed past him without words, and in the way nobles smiled too politely whenever he entered the same hall. He was not a man of politics, but he had lived long enough as a father to know when danger was circling. It was not the children's chaotic powers that threatened him now. It was the court itself. The queen sensed it too. Her throne had always been a place of strength, but as she sat among her nobles, she could feel their loyalty slipping. Their words were coated in honey, but the poison beneath was clear. They bowed deeply, praised her wisdom, yet every sentence returned to the same sharp point. The human was a threat. They claimed he held too much influence over the heirs. They whispered that he could one day control them. They feared he might teach them to obey him more than their own mother. One noble dared to say it aloud. "Majesty, forgive my boldness, but an empire cannot be guided by a servant. Your heirs are alien royalty, yet they call this man father. If you do not act soon, you will not be their only parent in their eyes. You will become the second." The queen's eyes burned with fury, but she did not answer. Instead, she dismissed the nobles with a gesture, though their whispers followed them out like shadows. She was torn. She knew the truth of their words. The children did cling to him more than they did to her. And yet, without him, they would spiral back into chaos. It was not her throne the empire needed now. It was his patience. That realization cut deeper than any blade. Meanwhile, the janitor faced the children's growing power with the same calm endurance. He had learned to anticipate their surges. He could see the tremble in the boy's hands before an energy blast erupted, and he would kneel, steadying him with a firm grip and quiet words. He could hear the shift in the girl's breathing before her scream could twist the air, and he would hold her close, rocking her until the danger passed. Each time, his body carried the marks, burns on his arms, bruises on his chest, cuts across his hands. Yet he never complained. He wore his pain like armor, refusing to abandon the twins, who had come to trust him completely. But one night, the nobles made their move. It began with silence. The janitor noticed the palace corridors unusually empty as he carried the twins back to their chamber. Guards who normally stood watch were gone. Servants who usually hurried by were missing. The hall stretched wide and quiet, as though the palace itself was holding its breath. His instincts screamed at him, but he kept walking, children in his arms. At the corner, figures stepped from the shadows. 5 nobles cloaked in dark robes, their eyes cold with determination. Behind them, soldiers blocked the exits. The twins stirred uneasily, sensing the tension in the air. One noble stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "Human, you have overstayed your welcome. You have no right to shape the heirs of our empire. Return them to us and walk away with your life." The janitor's jaw tightened. He shifted the twins behind him, shielding them with his body. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. "These children are not weapons for you to control. They are not pawns for your politics. They are children, and they need me," the nobles sneered. "They are royal blood, not your offspring. You are nothing but a janitor. Do not mistake their attachment for your right to claim them." The boy's eyes glowed, the girl's fists clenched. Their powers stirred, fueled by fear. The janitor whispered quickly to them, "Stay calm. Don't give them what they want. Trust me." His words, simple and firm, cut through their rising panic. The glow faded slightly, though the air still crackled. The nobles stepped closer. One raised his hand, signaling the soldiers. "Take them. If the queen will not act, then we will." But before the soldiers could move, the chamber doors burst open with a thunderous crack. The queen entered, her cloak trailing like shadow, her eyes burning with fury. The soldiers froze where they stood. The nobles bowed in fear, but their plotting had already been revealed. The queen's voice was cold enough to freeze stone. "You dare to touch my heirs? You dare to question my judgment?" She swept her gaze across the room, her presence crushing the air. "This human has done what none of you could. He has given my children peace. And you—" She pointed a sharp finger at the nobles. "You would rather see them suffer than admit your failure." The nobles trembled, but one dared to protest. "Majesty, the Empire will see it as weakness," her voice cut like steel. "The Empire will see results. My children are calm. My palace is safe. That is not weakness, that is strength. And if the galaxy laughs, let them laugh, for they do not rule here." "I do." The chamber shook with the force of her declaration. The nobles dropped their heads, defeated, though hatred still burned in their eyes. They retreated, but the queen knew this would not be the last of their plots. When the hall was empty, the queen turned to the janitor. For a long moment she said nothing, her expression unreadable. The twins clung to him, their small hands gripping tightly. Finally she spoke, her tone softer than he had ever heard. "You risked your life for them again," he nodded, weary but firm. "They're children. That's what fathers do." The word fathers pierced her once more, but this time she did not fight it. Instead, she looked at her children, safe and calm at his side, and realized that perhaps father was exactly what he had become. As she turned away, her heart wavered between envy and gratitude. She knew the nobles would not stop. She knew danger would grow. But in that moment, one truth stood taller than her pride. The human was no longer just a servant. He was a guardian, and perhaps the only one who could prepare her children for the galaxy that waited beyond. The nobles were silent in the throne room, but their silence was not surrender. They bowed when the queen ordered it. They smiled when she demanded it. Yet behind their polished words, their rage only grew stronger. The queen had humiliated them in front of guards and servants. She had chosen a human janitor, a servant with no name, no title over them. They would not forgive her for that. The janitor felt the weight of it as the days passed. He had lived through enough hardship to know when eyes were watching him not with curiosity, but with hatred. Every step he took in the palace felt heavier. The guards stiffened as he passed. Nobles whispered in corners, their voices cutting off when he entered. Even some of the servants who once smiled now looked away. He was not blind. He knew they blamed him, but none of it mattered when he was with the children. Their laughter still rang in the halls when he told them stories of Earth. Their hands still reached for him when nightmares tore at their sleep. They trusted him completely, and that was what kept him steady. He had been a father once before to his own child, and though life had stolen that away, here he found that part of himself again. To the twins, he was not a janitor. He was simply Dad. One afternoon, as he sat on the palace floor stacking blocks with the twins, the queen entered quietly. She did not speak at first. She only stood at the doorway, watching as her children laughed. Their powers were not gone, but they were calmer now, easier to guide. The janitor had taught them discipline without cruelty, kindness without weakness. She had once believed such things belonged only to the weak. Now she saw that it was strength of a different kind, but strength in the palace was never left unchallenged. The rebellion of the nobles began not with swords, but with words. They spread rumors across the empire that the queen had lost control. They whispered that her heirs were no longer hers, that they followed a human servant more than their own blood. They suggested she had grown soft, blind, and weak. In the marketplaces, people repeated the whispers. In the outer worlds, governors wrote cautious messages asking if the empire's throne was secure. The queen knew where the poison came from. She also knew she could not kill rumors with blades. The pressure grew heavier when an ambassador from a rival empire arrived. He bowed low, smiling with false respect. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dripping with honey, "we hear strange tales from your court, tales of a human who controls your heirs. Surely such stories are lies." His eyes glimmered, mocking. The queen's rage burned, but she did not let it show. "Believe what you wish," she said coldly. "When my heirs come of age, they will lead this empire as none before them." Yet the words rang hollow inside her. Because deep in her heart, she knew it was the human who had made that possible. The nobles pressed harder. They gathered in secret halls, plotting openly now. One night their leader, a tall noble with silver skin and jeweled robes, rose to speak. "The queen has chosen a servant over her people. She has allowed our heirs to be raised by a human. If we allow this to continue, the empire will be laughed at until it dies. We must act, not only against the human, but against the queen herself if she continues to protect him." There was silence, then slow nods. Rebellion was no longer a whisper. It was becoming a promise. The janitor did not know the full danger yet, but he could feel it pressing closer. One evening, while tucking the twins into bed, he noticed shadows lingering outside the door longer than usual. He did not sleep that night. He sat by the bed with tired eyes, watching, guarding. The children stirred in their dreams, whispering "Father" again, and he knew he could not leave them, not for anything. The queen, too, lay restless in her chambers. Her pride told her to send the human away, to cut the problem at its root. But her heart remembered the way her children clung to him. She remembered their laughter, their peace, and she knew deep down that without him her empire would crumble from the inside. For the first time in her reign, she was not sure if her crown alone was enough. The breaking point came during a feast. Nobles from across the empire gathered, their robes glittering, their eyes sharp. The queen sat upon her throne, her children at her side, calm under the watch of the janitor who stood just behind them. The hall buzzed with music and voices until one noble rose. He lifted his cup high, his smile sharp as a blade. "Your Majesty," he said loudly, "we all honor you. But tell us, who rules this palace now? Is it the queen, or the human your children call father?" The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to her. The twins stiffened, their powers crackling faintly, but the janitor laid a calming hand on their shoulders. His touch steadied them instantly. The queen saw it, and something inside her shifted. She rose slowly, her presence filling the hall. Her voice carried like thunder. "This man is no threat. He is the reason my children live in peace. He is the reason my palace still stands. You speak of weakness, but what you call weakness I call strength. You could not tame them. You could not guide them. He has done what all of you failed to do." Gasps echoed. Nobles whispered furiously, but she raised her hand for silence. "Mock me if you wish. Doubt me if you dare. But hear this. This human stands under my protection. Harm him and you defy me. And any who defy me will learn that my wrath is still stronger than their ambition." The hall trembled with her words. Some bowed reluctantly, others clenched their jaws in anger, but none dared challenge her openly. The janitor stood quietly, his eyes lowered, but his heart beat heavy. For the first time, the queen had not just allowed him to stay, she had claimed him as her ally before all. Yet both of them knew the danger had only grown. The nobles would not forgive, the empire would not forget, and the children, innocent as they were, stood at the center of a storm that could either destroy them or change the galaxy forever. The storm finally broke. The nobles had been patient for weeks, hiding their anger behind silk robes and jeweled smiles, but patience could only stretch so far. After the queen's declaration at the feast, her public defense of the human janitor, their fury turned to open rebellion. They could not kill him quietly now. The queen had made his protection a matter of her honor, so they aimed higher. They would not just remove the janitor. They would tear down the queen herself and replace her with one of their own. The first signs came in the city surrounding the palace. Rumors spread like fire through the streets. Whispers that the queen had grown weak, that she bowed to a human, that her heirs had been stolen from her hands. Merchants grumbled, soldiers muttered, and governors of faraway worlds began to send cautious letters, questioning whether the throne was stable. The queen knew these rumors were not random. They were seeds planted by her nobles, meant to shake the pillars of her rule. Inside the palace, tension hung thick. The janitor could feel it every time he walked the halls. Guards who once nodded in greeting now gripped their weapons tighter. Servants who once smiled now looked away. The twins, though still children, sensed the change too. Their powers flickered more often, their small hands glowing whenever they felt fear. It became harder to calm them, but the janitor never wavered. He held them through every storm, whispering the same words, "You are not monsters. You are my children. Breathe." But soon words would not be enough. One night the palace shook with the sound of boots. The janitor rushed to the children's chamber just as the doors burst open. Soldiers poured in, their armor gleaming, their eyes filled with grim duty. Behind them stood nobles, cloaked in power, their faces twisted with triumph. The leader stepped forward, voice loud enough to echo through the room. "By order of the council," he declared, "the queen is unfit to rule." The heirs will be taken into our care. The human is to be removed at once." The children screamed, their powers exploding in a storm of raw energy. The walls cracked, the floor trembled, and light burst like lightning through the chamber. Soldiers staggered, shielding their faces. The janitor threw himself in front of the twins, his body bearing the brunt of the chaos. "Stay behind me," he shouted, his voice firm, even as his skin burned with the force. The queen arrived moments later, her cloak whipping behind her, her eyes blazing with fury. She did not hesitate. With a wave of her hand, her guards clashed with the rebels. Steel rang against steel, the chamber filled with the roar of battle. In the chaos, the janitor did the only thing he knew. He shielded the children. He crouched low, wrapping his arms around them, whispering calm words, even as the world around them threatened to shatter. Slowly, painfully, their cries softened, their power dimmed. But the room was still aflame with conflict. The nobles pressed forward, shouting over the noise. "See how they cling to him! He has stolen them from their mother. He is the true danger." The queen's voice thundered above the din. "No, he is their protector, and you, traitors, are the danger to my throne." Her blade gleamed as she struck, moving with a fury the palace had not seen in years. She fought not as a ruler, but as a mother. Every cut, every strike was fueled by rage at those who threatened her children. Yet for every noble she struck down, more soldiers surged forward. The janitor knew they could not hold forever. He looked at the queen across the chaos, their eyes meeting for a single heartbeat. In that glance, there was no crown, no throne, only two parents fighting for the same children. He rose, still shielding the twins, and shouted above the battle, "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." His voice carried, cutting through the clash of weapons. For a moment, even the rebels hesitated. He was no warrior, no noble, no alien lord, just a man. But his stance, battered and burned, was unyielding. The children clung to him, their small voices trembling as they whispered the word that silenced even the queen's heart. "Father." The chamber froze. The rebels stared, their argument shattered by that single word. The queen herself felt her chest tighten. In that instant, the truth was undeniable. These children did not see him as a servant. They saw him as their protector, their guide, their father. To rip him away would not save them. It would destroy them. The queen seized the silence. Her voice rang out like thunder. "You call me weak for trusting him, but look at my heirs." For years they knew only fear. Now for the first time they know love. You think this makes us fragile? No, it makes us stronger than you will ever be. Her words crashed over the chamber like a tidal wave. Some soldiers lowered their weapons, uncertain. Others stepped back, doubt in their eyes. The rebellion began to fracture, not with blood but with truth. The nobles screamed in anger, but their power was broken. The queen's guards surged forward, scattering them. One by one they were dragged from the chamber, their cries echoing down the halls. Silence fell at last. The chamber lay in ruins. Walls cracked, furniture shattered. The queen stood tall, her blade dripping, her eyes still burning with fury. But when she turned, it was not the rebels she looked at. It was the human, still crouched on the floor, the children clinging to him. For a long moment, she said nothing. The janitor met her gaze, exhausted but steady, his arms still around the twins. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. He was no longer just a janitor. He was no longer just a human in her palace. He was family. The queen finally spoke, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. "You saved them. You saved us all." The janitor shook his head. "No, they saved themselves. They just needed someone to believe in them." The queen's eyes lingered on him, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel not envy, not pride, but gratitude. She had fought to protect her throne, but it was this man who had given her children a future. As the night settled, and the palace guards dragged away the last of the traitors, the queen knew the truth could no longer be denied. The human janitor had changed everything, not only for her children, but for her empire. And though the galaxy would whisper, though nobles would plot again, she no longer cared. because in the heart of her palace her children had found peace. And in that peace, the future of her empire had been reborn.